Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast. Today's guest is Blake D. Bauer. Blake is the author of the international best-selling book, You Were Not Born to Suffer. Each year, he helps thousands of people who cannot find effective support from conventional psychology, medicine, or religion. Blake is a world-renowned teacher and speaker with an extensive background in psychology, alternative medicine, nutrition, traditional healing, and mindfulness meditation. Based on both his personal experience overcoming deep suffering, addiction, and adversity, as well as his professional success with over 100,000 people worldwide, Blake's pioneering work integrates what he's found to be the most effective approaches to optimal mental, emotional, and physical health. Blake, it's such an honor to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you, Jason. I'm excited for our chat.
Yeah, when I started going through your book and I was going through the different sections, and I'd read certain sections to my wife too, who's very much involved in the work that we do, and we do a lot of stuff together. Some of it should be like, ooh, get goosebumps when I heard that. So one of those sections I'll read to you when we get to that really resonate with her. But yeah, definitely, I think it is so important right now to be able to pull in this bigger picture of physical, mental, emotional health, because it seems like things have been really diversified and segmented over the years. And I love it when it's all pulled back together and we look at people as a totality again.
Absolutely. And especially now during the pandemic and what we're experiencing, in each of our countries and globally, I have found that there's a lot of instability mentally and emotionally that people are having, trouble dealing with. For example, someone I knew from high school years ago, I just heard actually took his life. I read another statistic in Australia about the suicide statistics, how high they are. And so I think there's a lot of suffering behind closed doors that we're not aware of. We see the economy, we see the riots, we see the politics, but there's a lot of mental and emotional pain that is being unaddressed because a lot of people are at a loss, which is one of the reasons I wanted to do an interview like this with you. And
yeah, I completely agree. I think it's one of those things that there's this undercurrent of pain and suffering that has been going on for so many people. But part of what's happened with COVID is it's really given a chance for that to completely come to the surface to see what's there. And as painful as it might be, there is definitely, it's bringing awareness to a lot of stuff that a lot of people are all going through, and more people than I think. A lot of times with this stuff, I feel like people think they're alone in it. And if anything, what this is showing us is that we are not alone in this. This is a global, I would say, bigger epidemic than anything else that we've seen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
Blake, in your introduction in the book, you had said that you were not born to suffer, was born out of your personal quest for two things in life. The first was freedom from your own mental, emotional, and physical suffering. And the second was the unquenchable desire that you had for the truth about life, the truth about yourself, and most importantly, the truth about your life's destined purpose. I really like that because I think those are two huge things. So I'm wondering if you can, I know that's a big question to start off with, but how did your life experience culminate to those two big questions that you needed answers to?
Well, Jason, I guess unconsciously as a young man, as a child and then a teenager, I struggled mentally and emotionally, but I never knew how to talk about it, obviously. And so like most people, really, not just many people, but I think most people, I had developed a very unhealthy and toxic relationship to myself, mentally within my thoughts, emotionally inside of myself, in terms of my capacity to understand my emotions and express them in a healthy way. And so as a young man, I was very self-destructive. And then like most of us, I found habits to numb out and to feel better and to distract myself from the things I didn't understand how to deal with. So for me, I went to food. I had, eating issues, overeating. I even, had bulimia at one point where I was, not wanting to keep down what I had. And then I got into drugs. So I was smoking pot and I was drinking a lot of alcohol, partying a lot. And then I got into pharmaceutical pills, which really was the thing that destroyed my life at a young age. And so in just a very intuitive, instinctual way, and also trying to survive socially and I guess have some fun at that time in my life, I developed severe addictions and severe self-destructive habits to cope with these symptoms that I wasn't even aware of. I would never have obviously been able to articulate this to you. And so by the time I was 18, I had been arrested a number of times for drug possession. And I also happened to be a good athlete growing up, and I played football, American football, and was a captain of the varsity football team with my two best friends. And by the time I was 17, 18, I had offers to play in college with my two, best friends. And so I was doing well on that side of my life, but then very self-destructive socially and when I wasn't training or playing sports. And at the age of 17, I got a very bad DUI on pot, marijuana, on pills, Xanax in particular, a high dosage, and a lot of alcohol. And I got, as a result of that DUI, halfway through my senior season on my way to play in college, I got kicked off the football team. I was asked to resign and asked to tell my team that I couldn't represent them. I wasn't fit. And from there on, I spiraled downhill into what I would call a suicidal depression, where I was waking up every day, tortured mentally and emotionally, completely confused and lost. And so at the age 18, when a lot of my peers in my mind seemed to be okay and seemed to be okay either going to work or going to school and maybe coasting a little bit into those parts of those chapters of their life, I had already kind of burnt the candle at every end, broken all these rules, exercised all my freedoms, and found myself lost, 100% lost and confused about who I was, because who I had been had completely shattered. I think we had talked about this concept of a death of self. I had this ego or this identity at 17, 18, and then through my own self-sabotage and my own self-destructive behavior, I destroyed all the aspects of my life that were associated with that identity. And so without those aspects of my life and being so anxious and insecure and tortured mentally, I had no idea who I was, let alone what to do with my life, let alone what my purpose on the earth was, what to study in school, how to make a living. So at 18, I took on the weight of the world in terms of how do I free myself from this pain and suffering, because I'm waking up every day tortured. And part of that torment was I don't know what to do with my life. And I feel like I'm supposed to figure that out. And I feel like everybody else either has it figured out or doesn't really care as much. But I was not like that. And so at 18, I moved forward, waking up every day trying to answer these two questions, which went hand in hand for me, which is how do I free myself from this mental, emotional, and physical pain? And what's the purpose of my life? And me finding clarity about the purpose of my life helped me liberate myself from suffering. And then me learning how to free myself of pain helped me have clarity around the purpose of my life. And so I just kept following whatever felt good and felt healthy and felt right in terms of answers to those two questions.
I like that you also just mentioned what felt right. This is a point that I've been bringing back a lot to people over the last while too, is in a lot of ways, I feel like we've been very disconnected from our feeling sense, and something I want to talk to you about in a bit too. But I feel like in a lot of ways, it's like, very definite ideas on what's good, what's bad, what you should feel, what you shouldn't feel, emotions or weakness, a lot of different things along these lines. And I feel like, and then we've kind of moved away from emotions and more to sort of almost logic. And logic can be great, but I think if you can get those two working in tandem, then you're really moving in the right direction. And when you were mentioning just that you were paying close attention to what really felt right to you, sometimes I think that that's a hard one for people to even connect to, because they're so disconnected from their feelings as far as what even does feel right for people anymore. or am I doing it because it feels right for me, or am I doing it because it feels right for this person or for this situation? Or, it's like they've become very disconnected from their sense of self.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
when you were mentioning true self, so what does that mean? What is the true self?
Absolutely. It's a really great question. And again, there's lots of ideas around a concept like the true self, but I like to, over the years, I've grown to like to make it as practical for people as possible. And so it goes back even to what the topic you were expressing about before, which is that in the present moment, our experience of ourselves is what we're feeling right now in the present in our body, which would be a physical sensation and an emotional or energetic sensation. So you can feel hot or cold, you can feel angry, you can feel excited, you can feel anxious. So what you're feeling in the present is a big part of that. And then being honest and vulnerable about what you're feeling is really the essence of the true self. And then also what you're thinking is connected to it, but that's a little bit trickier because a lot of us have very negative, toxic, and unhealthy thought patterns. But underneath that dysfunction in our mind is the brilliance within the human psyche that creates the most brilliant, human inventions and aspects of being alive that we've experienced, like the battery or that beautiful like home you're living in. Someone first imagined that in their mind, did a blueprint, and then found all the resources they needed and the people they needed to put it together. Airplanes, technology, like I have this beautiful MacBook Pro I'm using, this all started in the mind of man, which is a very amazing, miraculous manifestation of the human psyche and thinking. But a lot of us are tortured by negative thinking throughout the day. And so developing an awareness of your negative thoughts and that you're not those negative thoughts and you're not just the voice in your head, and that there is an intelligence or an awareness or a consciousness underneath those thoughts that's also there. That's a very big part of getting to know your true self. And I think that's one of the things, and again, it ties back to what you were just outlining, is that one of the reasons why we often live an entire lifetime without feeling a very deep, clear connection to our true self is because we're trapped in these very limited voices in our head. And we think that's all we are, is just that voice in our head. But the life inside of us, the intelligence inside of us, the awareness and the consciousness inside of us is much bigger, much more powerful, much more what we are than that tiny limited voice in your head, that narrative, which is typically composed of beliefs and conditioning that we got from mom and dad, school, religion, and society. And then we took it on, believed that voice in the head, and then are just trying to survive, basically. But there is a lot more life beyond survival-based, fear-based thinking. So those are two of the primary things. Get in touch with that awareness and that consciousness underneath your toxic thinking, and then getting in touch with what you're feeling in the present, which is very much connected to what you need and what you want and what you feel called to from a very deep place.
Mm-hmm. And where do you start that process? Because in my mind, a lot of times when people are trying to connect with what we would call that true self, or in how I think about it is it's this authentic connection to source or something larger than yourself, however you want to describe it, your inner physician, your inner self. And it's very experiential. It's almost like you have to have an experience with it to really understand it, or I should say to know it, right? But in my experience, one of the rate limiting steps in it is that it's hard to get there when you're kind of stuck in fear-based thinking and you're stuck in fight or flight a lot of the time. What's your experience with that as far as for even opening up the door to being able to actually experience something like that, so people can have firsthand knowledge of that inner experience, of this expansiveness, that we are more than this rhetoric and dialogue that's going on in our head all the time? And not that that's even necessarily a bad thing. That's useful for a lot of stuff, but there's just a lot more to who we are. But in order to have an experience like that, what are some suggestions on what people can do to start to open the door to allowing that in?
Absolutely. Well, thankfully, the silver lining is that you don't have to go very far because your true nature is always there underneath your crazy thinking and underneath your pain. It's inside you. You can never lose it. It just gets covered up. So thankfully, you don't need to go to a monastery, and you don't need to hike the Himalayas or find the guru. It's all inside. Once we, begin to heal, it just blossoms. But I think everybody tastes it at some point, which is really what keeps anybody going in life. For example, when you hear a song you love and it makes you feel a certain way, you feel that freedom of your spirit or that freedom of your mind. Or some people find it through exercise, where they lose thought, through running or some form of exercise. Some people find it in art. Some people find it in their relationships through loving, the people they care about. They kind of lose themselves in it, which is why actually a lot of toxic habits are set up in relationship, because loving and giving is so natural. But yet if it's not coming from a really conscious place and you don't have a healthy relationship to yourself, it's very easy to get trapped in self-destructive, people-pleasing behavior where you're a martyr and you do for everybody all the time because you don't really know who you are, what you want, what feels good to you. So the only thing you do know is, I'll just take care of everybody else, because deep down, I have this subconscious narrative that I don't matter. I don't matter. I don't even know who I am. I don't even want to open up that can of worms. So I'm just going to stay on the course that I'm on, which is a very common story for a lot of people. So thankfully, the answers are really not that complicated. And for me, this has developed it kind of into the heart of my work, which really is the case because it's been the heart of my path, because I wanted to understand how to be in touch with and never lose touch with this part of me, and never betray this part of me again for any reason, for money, for love, for approval, for professional success. I wanted to always maintain the integrity of that inner truth. And it's been hard in this world, but the more I did it, the more I realized how valuable it was for me, and then how valuable it was to offer an example and tools for other people. So one of the keys is meditation, obviously, is taking time to sit and breathe and to just observe your thoughts, so you can see that you are not your thoughts, but they're a part of you, and they're a part of you that control you, torture you, and disempower you if you don't do something about it. And so that is one very important part of this. So there's really, I talk about 4 pillars or 4 keys, and they kind of answer every single question that you could ever ask on this topic. And so part of taking care of your mind is also realizing that you have the power to choose your thoughts. And this is a topic I like to teach people, because when you just allow your mind to run wherever, like, you wake up in the morning and your thoughts are awake, and there's typically 20 different thoughts or voices in your head, and they're conflicting, and you're spread thin and you're stressed out, fragmented from the first thing in the morning when you open your eyes. And so if you don't do something about it, then you're just going to be the victim of your thoughts all day, every day. And if you don't realize that you can do something about it, not only can you do something like meditation, but you can actually, just like driving a car, you can choose and guide the direction of your thinking throughout the day. So when you're, quote unquote, holding that steering wheel and you start to drift into oncoming traffic or into self-harm, there are ways to teach yourself, to coach yourself, to think about things that are healthier for you, to think about things that feel better for you, to choose a new thought. And the more you do that, the more you create new neurological pathways that fire regularly and that become habits. So that's one way, is to find, I teach a very specific form of meditation, but there are so many kinds of meditation. So for anybody listening in general, just to find any kind of self-care practice that involves meditation is key. So you start breathing deeply, you start working with the thoughts in your head, and you don't just let them keep running. The second one, Jason, which is a very big one, is to start being honest and kind, so vulnerable and kind about what you're feeling in every situation and relationship starting now. Because a lot of people, I'd say half of the population are not even aware that they're keeping in their feelings, that they're repressing their emotions in a majority of their relationships and situations on a daily basis. And then the other half of the population is aware that they're doing it, but they're stuck because they're scared of upsetting people or of negative reactions, or they don't want to hurt people, or they feel guilty or ashamed for what they feel, need, and want. And so if you never open up about all the things inside, both, the darkness in terms of things that we would call uncomfortable, like fear or guilt or shame or anger, but also opening up about your joy and your passion and your dreams and the things that light you up and turn you on. If you don't let those things out, they're going to destroy you from the inside out. So that's another way to begin. And integral to that is you need time and space on your own to be in touch with that. So you can't really meditate, have a nice meditation practice, even if it's for 10 minutes around other people, And if you're always around other people, worrying about what they're thinking and feeling and what they need, then you don't even have time to listen to your, what we're calling the true self. You don't even have time to listen to what you feel or need or want, or to move at your own pace, or to instinctually go do something that feels like the medicine and the nourishment you need today in that moment, whether it's a walk or a cup of coffee or exercise or a bath or a nap. You need time and space on your own to listen to the inner prompts that you're always getting through your body, through your nervous system, through your subconscious, and then they rise into consciousness in different ways. But you got to have space to listen.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the, they're all obviously loaded, but these are the places we need to start.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I think so much of it initially is just slowing things down so that you can stop and pay attention to stuff. Like a lot of times, like when you're talking about even meditation or, mindfulness, where we take that almost practice into our daily lives and we're trying to pay attention to something. This is what I like about exercises like the Course in Miracles and whatnot, which I know you've quoted a few times, one of my favorite courses we've done several times too. And it makes you kind of contemplate something and slow it down, and you're kind of keeping in check on it throughout the day. Because so often I think we just go into autopilot, so our routine thoughts they're just there. They're just doing the same thing they always do. It's like you said, there's a whole neural network engaged that's causing it to happen, and it becomes absolutely default. So just by stopping for a moment to pay attention to it, that in itself starts to break that circuit, which then leaves it open to create something else. And I kind of explain it to people where it's like, when you're caught up in these patterns of negative thinking and you're trying to start to slow things down to create some change, it's like going through the jungle and you got to almost, pull your machete out and hack through the roughage and the trees and everything to start to gradually build a trail. But if you keep doing that over and over and over again, eventually that becomes the path, and the path that you start to not pay attention to gradually gets overgrown again with trees and everything. And then that doesn't become your default anymore. But so much of it just seems like slowing it down to then be able to start to apply these techniques to break the patterns of it. I think so wise and so important.
Because these habits have such inertia, that's often why most people need some kind of wake-up call before they really take this seriously. Because if you are used to going so fast and you don't know how to stop and you're running from yourself and there's a can of worms in there, typically what happens is you will have some kind of accident. And, this is how a lot of car accidents come about, a lot of falls, slips and falls. Some kind of major mistake that physically impacts you. And then the other thing that comes as wake-up calls are disease. So when you get cancer, when you get autoimmune disease, and you think, where did this come from? It's your body, your subconscious is crying out to you. You need to value me more. You need to pay more attention. You need to take better care of me. You need to stop living the way you're living because it's actually very toxic for you. And you need to start understanding, how do you nourish this organism? How do you take care of this life, this miracle? And so in my experience, unfortunately, I've always had to learn the hard way, unfortunately. And a lot of people are like that because we've just adopted all these habits and ways of thinking to survive, to survive our homes, to survive school, to survive socially, then to make a living, put food on the table. And so we never learned these new habits. So we don't even know. We just don't know, It's like you said, it's just default and we're just surviving.
Yeah. And that's a hard one sometimes I find for people to totally open up to and grasp, that even when we have these accidents and we have these things that sort of stop us in our tracks we want to just sort of make very quick logical sense out of what happened. But so many times I regret, and I know in my life that has happened many times. And now it's like, and now there's certain tells. I can tell when certain things in my body start to go off. I'm like, oop, that's that feeling of over responsibility that I'm taking on. And it's causing me to have that left shoulder ache that I get when, like, you start to pay attention to it, and then you can catch it before it becomes a bigger problem, because you've got the awareness around it, and you recognize the interconnections between it. So then you can do something about it ahead of time. It's like if people are struggling with the concept that things like disease and even accidents and these things that happen can be related to our mental, emotional bodies, I generally think a nice, fun way to play with it is what if questions. So it's like, rather than just making it a statement, maybe it's like, well, what if my thoughts and feelings were related to this condition? If that were the case, then what? It's almost like it lets you kind of ease into it a little bit and play with some different ways of thinking and some different perspectives without it sort of going, nope, this is the way it works. And because sometimes people put up a little bit of a defense around that when we have something that doesn't quite fit our belief system. So if I'm going to tickle into it a little bit, play with it by what if questions. I always find that a fun experiment to do when I'm trying to work on my own limited beliefs around things.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds like a very, skillful way to go about it.
Because limiting beliefs play such a big role with a lot of the stuff. They play into ultimately what that dialogue is that's going on that creates so much suffering, which then ties into how we end up feeling. And it's this whole constant suffering mechanism that takes place. How do you start to bring awareness to, or work with changing limiting beliefs to start to try and create some beliefs that are more expansive and actually are helpful for us? Where do you begin that process with people?
Well, there's kind of two directions. You can start from the inside out and then the outside in, and they're both good and you can do them both. And so the inside out is, again, going back to meditation, where you become vividly aware of what you're thinking, because beliefs are just thoughts that we keep thinking. That's all they are. So, let's say you believe that the world is flat, and that's a very serious belief to you. All that is you have this idea in your head, a thought that the world is flat, and you keep thinking it, and then you have probably attached your identity to it. This is who I am. I believe the world is flat. And if you believe the world is round, well, we don't see eye to eye, and I'm going to hang out with people who see the world is flat, likely, because, we think the same. So it's empowering to know that a belief is just the thought that you keep thinking. And then it's good to ask, okay, so where does this come from? Where did this thinking come from? Where did this belief come from? Because a lot of times it came from mom and dad, or it came from your religious upbringing. When you think about the biggest topics like love, and you think, look, what do I believe about love? So this is an exercise that's really helpful. You can write down, the main topics in human existence. Let's say love. What do I believe about love? And then write down, I believe love is this, and I believe all men are this, and I believe all women are this, and I believe relationships are all that. You're going to very quickly see what you believe or what you think about love, about men, about women, about relationships, etc. And then you can say, what do I believe about God? And then write down. And just, very honestly, just for yourself, you can start to dissect. Oh, I actually think God is not real, or I think God is everything, or I think God is the universe. And you can start to articulate and get clear for yourself what you actually think about these things, which is what we call our beliefs. And then you can ask yourself, where did that come from? So what do I believe about X? Where did X come from? Where did it come from? Does it come from my lived experience? Does it come from my parents or my education or the religion I was raised in? And then the next, I think, most important question is, does this thinking serve me? And this is really the most important thing, because the truth is that all beliefs and all thoughts are just thoughts, which are just illusions. They're really just thoughts. And so I talk about thoughts and ideas in terms of a raft. And so to me does this raft, or the thought or the belief, take you where you want to go? And most people want to be on a raft that's going to take them to happiness or to peace or to happiness or to love and connection. So to me, if your beliefs and your thoughts are not helping you be more open, be more loving, be happier every day, feel more connected, then I would consider them limiting and destructive, and in need of being addressed. And so starting to ask yourself, and I think reflect and dissect on them, this is the outside in approach. For me, it began with meditation, because I was so tortured by my mind just in general. It had nothing to do with me even having an awareness that I had beliefs. It was just like, I can't get out of bed because I can't think straight, let alone I have got a belief about money or women that's holding me back. That came a lot later. But so for me, meditation was a way I could wake up every morning, pay attention to my breathing, pay attention to my body, and over time develop more space between my awareness and the thought. So I could then learn to watch the thought and then view the thought or the belief as like a cloud in the sky that was just passing by. And I didn't have to go get on that cloud and ride it all the way wherever it was going. I could just say, okay, you know what? I don't need to believe everything I think. And I also don't need to believe, I don't have to believe everything that I think. And I don't have to keep thinking the same thought over and over and over again if I don't want to. And over time through meditation, you find that you have that power, which is very liberating when you know I don't have to believe everything I think. I don't have to keep thinking the same thought over and over again if it doesn't serve me. And so the key question is, does this thinking set me free or keep me trapped? And if I'm not happy in some area of my life, that means my thinking's keeping me trapped. And I have not yet learned how to choose a different way of thinking about the situation and life in general.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's great. I remember being said once with, if beliefs are being supportive or if they're not. And I think it's just simple, take the emotion out of it. Is like, is it working or is it not working? And you usually know by how it makes you feel and what's showing up in your life. And if you just took, if you just took stock of that and said, okay, you know what, like I feel really good all the time, or I'm feeling, more than not, and I'm catching when I'm not, and I'm using it as a tool to figure out how to feel better, and I like the direction of my life and everything's feeling really good, then you're probably doing a lot more, your beliefs are probably more supportive for you. And if they're not so much, then it just means just relook at them. And then, like you said, what I think is really powerful about things like meditation too, and what you've always obviously had lots of experience with, is that it's like in the process of just sitting and literally doing not much of anything, eventually that space develops, and then you sort of get these aha kind of insights that arise almost spontaneously out of stuff, just because you're giving some space for allow that deeper sense of intuition and wisdom to surface. That's my experience with it, and why I really am a proponent of meditation. I think it just slows things down enough to let people have insights that are there. They're inside you all the time. They're not coming from outer space. You're just connecting to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And the other thing that you just prompted was a lot of people like affirmations and gravitate towards affirmations. And what affirmations really are is a new thought or a new belief that you're plugging in. And at first you might not believe it. So if you feel inadequate and insecure in your life, and then you start trying to think a thought, I am enough, and I always feel secure, you're going to feel a disconnect at first. You're going to feel like you're lying to yourself, which is true. But you can find thoughts that are kind of a middle ground that actually you're like, you know what, actually I can believe that. Like, because I'm a human being, I deserve to be treated with kindness and respect just because I exist, which is a pretty objective truth. So you can say things like that if you're used to allowing yourself to be mistreated in a relationship, for example. You can, instead of, the narrative like nobody's ever going to love me, I must be a piece of shit, this is what I deserve. You can adopt a practice of, okay, I'm going to think this thought as much as I can throughout the day, or I'm going to put it on a Post-it note in my car, or I'm going to write it on the mirror in my bathroom, that, all human beings deserve kindness and respect. Just so you start to remind yourself of this healthier way of thinking. And so that's where a lot of people really gravitate towards affirmations, because it's a way to, just like when you go to the gym to build biceps, you have to do the reps. When you sit in meditation, every time you sit in meditation for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you do a practice, you're doing a rep, you're building that awareness and that capacity to choose and to redirect your thinking. And every time you look at an affirmation that you wrote on the mirror, that's in your car, or you have a affirmation deck next to your bed or on your desk, for example, every time you look at that and you read that, you're doing another rep to build a new neurological pathway in your brain, to build a new habit. And it is, when you've never been exposed to really healthy thinking, because the truth is a lot of people grow up in a vacuum of their family and their education that is very limited in their thinking, your beliefs, your way of seeing the world, your way of doing things. And so a lot of people have never been exposed to healthy thoughts like, I'm one with the universe, or I can actually create and achieve anything I want to. These realities, feel so distant and foreign to a lot of people because they just never had the support that they wanted or needed, which typically goes back to because their parents never had the support that they wanted or needed, and their parents never had the support that they wanted or needed. And so I really view, Jason, and I'm sure you'll appreciate this view, is that the conversation we're having about the toxic and self-destructive habits and relationships that we have to ourselves in our mind, in our heart, emotionally and physically, is the conversation that defines evolution to me. So the evolution of human consciousness. And then for those of you who are familiar now with the study of epigenetics and the way that our thoughts and our emotions influence gene expression. So evolution is happening from this conversation, because in order for us to take the next step as human beings, we have to put an end to the self-destruction inside, because what we're doing to the planet, the destruction that we do to the people and to the environment around us, is a mirror or a symptom of the self-destructive relationship we have to ourselves. So this topic is so loaded and so important, and it starts with those moment by moment choices and habits that we focus on, from doing a little meditation or expressing what we feel, or keeping in check the negative narratives and thoughts and beliefs, and then saying, you know what, I want to think something healthier that makes me feel better, and so I need to work on that. And that shifts your DNA. It shifts the DNA of the future. It evolves your immediate family and bloodline. It evolves the awareness of the planet, how we take care of the earth. And it all starts with these little things we're talking about in the mind and in the heart, which is important to see. It's got huge ripple effects. It's just huge.
I love that you brought that up, because it's even one of the almost missions that we have for even the Inspire Health podcast. It's this concept of like, it starts within yourself, ripples out to the communities, and eventually ripples out to the world. I'm not saying there's rights or wrongs with these things, but I agree it has to start within us. And sometimes what we do when we want to change the world, we focus on trying to change the world. Sometimes I think because it's almost easier to focus on changing the world than going back and starting with the little things that we need to work with ourselves. And I think this reminds me back of Mother Teresa's quote where she talked about it needs to start at home first. It's almost like that's the most difficult part, but that's where it all starts. And if we're not starting there, we're actually, even when we're trying to change things on a bigger picture, if that's not fundamentally changed from that internal world first, we're not really doing what we think we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really love that you brought that in, because I think, and I think right now there's gosh, over these last 6 months, there's been so much stuff going on and so much upheaval. And in my way, I'm thinking it's just showing how much healing needs to take place on an individual level in order to then authentically create some real shift in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel we're in the middle of a very big tipping point right now because
Yeah.
through pain, a lot of people have just woken up. For better or worse, people are aware of their thoughts and their emotions more than they ever have been, and it's not happening by mistake. So,
Yeah, 100%. One thing you mentioned that I think is a really important piece too is you talked about people remembering that they matter. And it reminds me, gosh, like about 15 years ago, I think I started a website at one point with a friend of mine called My Life Matters around that concept. And it's kind of been worked into another platform we did called Global Shifts. But the idea was just that, again, this idea that it starts with the individual and then goes out from there. And so important for people to really take hold of that concept that their life does matter, that they do mean, there's very much meaning to who they are. There's a purpose as to why they're here, and trying to connect with that. But what I find a lot of the times is that, and I would say the biggest group that I see probably that this plays with the most are my patients that are working moms. I find that they are the lowest on the totem pole than anybody else in the family. So their concept of their life matters, they might grasp that too on an intellectual level, but in the reality, they're usually way down on the bottom of the totem pole, and like 5 or 6 other things are well ahead of them before they're able to sort of take care of themselves. And it creates a ton of feelings of disconnect and guilt, I find, and resentment and obligation and these types of sensations that are swirling around with them, which then just creates more guilt, because I think most of my patients that are these wonderful, hardworking moms just feel like they're supposed to be experts at every single thing and manage the family and manage the kids. And then, it's just a lot of stuff. So where do you start with that too? What would you say around that concept with how do you start to really embody that your life matters? And then how do you actually start to implement that when there is a lot of things on your plate?
Well, again, it all starts with my feelings matter, my needs matter, and my desires matter. In terms of, if we're talking about women and this habit, this is kind of a way of living and a way of being a woman that's been passed down for generations. And obviously it's changing now more than I think ever. But, our mothers, lived in a different way than our partners do today. And then, our grandmothers, their role and their access to education and access to independence, it's evolved a lot in the last 3 generations. And so it's a habit that's been passed down. It's an expectation of a woman. It's an expectation of a man, of these roles that we tend to play together. But the root of it goes back to, typically, it's true for men too, is that we get into a relationship, into a marriage, and then have a family before we really know who we are, before we are emotionally aware enough to know what we feel, what we need, and what we want, and then to communicate it in a healthy way. So then we don't even know how to do this, but now we've got us, we've got the partner, and then we've got children, and there's all these feelings and all these needs and all these desires, and it's a very feminine trait to put everybody else first. And what I think is a really beautiful way to look at this, especially for women, and I think it's true for men, but it's more visceral for women, is that the woman actually creates life inside of her. And then she births this life from inside of her out into the world. And in one of the chapters in my book, I talk about this, how I think our children are an aspect of ourselves that we birth into the world. And through learning to love them unconditionally, we learn to love ourselves unconditionally. So through understanding their feelings, you learn about your feelings. Through understanding their needs, you actually learn more about your needs. And through understanding they have a destiny and that you can't control them, you then to learn to honor that in yourself as well. And so my worldview is that everything is happening in the name of love, and we're all learning to love ourselves so that we can love others more fully and then just enjoy being alive. And so when you have children and you have a family and you're managing these responsibilities, if you really dissect it, the underlying lesson is, how do I love and take care of myself in a healthy way so that I can keep my cup full and be there, but sustain being there and give from a place where I'm not spread thin and I'm not feeling resentful. And um, and the key to doing that is starting to honor what you feel, what you need, and what you want now, and balancing it. So instead of having such an over energy on everybody else, you have to give yourself permission to, as I was saying before, take care of your mind a bit, have some time and space for yourself, and express what's really going on for you. Because if you keep it in and you don't take time for yourself and you don't take time to deal with all those thoughts and all the guilt, because the guilt is not just a feeling, it comes up and it's a belief. Oh, I am scared. It's really, I am scared if I do this, I might upset my husband, or the kids might think I don't care about them, or I might not be able to get it all done. So if you really start to dissect it, it's not just an emotion, it's a whole belief system about, oh, I'm a bad mother, or I'm a bad wife, or I'm not a good enough mother, or I'm not a good enough wife. And so then you have to start to dissect, that belief system. But if you don't do a little bit of self-reflection, you don't express what you're feeling to your partner, to the people around you, and do it in a healthy way, and take a little bit of time for yourself, it's going to be hard to address and to stop repeating the pattern that your mother did, basically, or that your caretaker did, for you growing up. So, and again, as a parent, it turns out to be very healthy when you teach your children how to have a healthy relationship to themselves. So as a parent, it's very healthy to say, I feel really tired right now. I need just a little bit of time for me, and then we'll do X, Y, and Z. And you start to actually communicate all these truths so that they get to understand that you're a human and you have feelings, and then you have needs and you have desires. And then they're going to mirror that back, and they're going to learn from you because you're modeling it. And we know about mirror neurons and modeling behavior, and children, like the old cliche, do as I say, but not as I do. But that's not what happens. We do what you do because we're learning from you how to live life. So if you have a daughter and she's watching your wife, the mother, she's gonna, I love mom. I want to be like mom. I'm going to be a mom one day. And this is how she does it. So I think that's how you do it. This is all happening on a subconscious level. So it's all about modeling. So I think typically the pendulum has just swung a bit too far in martyrdom. And then this brings up another very loaded conversation, which is my view that human beings are intrinsically selfish. But we learned a very self-destructive form of selfishness that I call unhealthy selfishness, which gives self-care and self-love a bad name. So I feel guilty that I want to take care of myself because I believe that that's selfish and that that's somehow negative and wrong. When if you look at nature is intrinsically designed to selfishly care for its needs, to have a sense of self-preservation, because if an apple tree does not get the water it needs and the sunlight it needs and the oxygen or the carbon dioxide that it needs from the atmosphere and the nutrients it needs, how can an apple tree grow to be this huge, strong apple tree that then can provide shade and food and firewood, for generations? So it's the same thing with a human being. We have this really twisted perspective on self-care because we believe, and we've been told, that selfishness is wrong. And the irony is it goes back to our childhood where our parents wanted us to do things that made their life easier or pleasing to them. So it's like if I said to you, Jason, don't do what you want to do, that's selfish. I want you to do what I wanted you to do. Well, am I not selfish in telling you that you should do what I want you to do? You know what I mean? So this is going to me, I call this kind of the golden thread in human consciousness, is understanding this dynamic between healthy selfishness, unhealthy selfishness. The root cause of guilt, the root cause of these fears is because really as a little kid, we just never learned how to say what I feel, what I need, what I want matters. because mom and dad were selfish even themselves, but struggling with it, never learned how to love themselves. And so we start at a young age feeling guilty. So for any woman who's listening that's a mother in that scenario, she grew up with guilt for having feelings. She grew up with guilt for having needs and desires. They were just unconscious. So through becoming a mother, she became aware of the fact that she feels guilty for what she feels, needs, and wants. But that guilt was there in childhood and began with her parents when she didn't want to upset mom or didn't want to upset dad, or they were busy. And so she wanted to be a good girl, wanted to please them or not upset them. And that was hiding inside of this, in this case, this example, this mother. And it comes out when you have your own children, and then you feel guilty, and then you pass on the habit of guilt to your children unintentionally, but you do. And because that's what your parents did to you. And now you're creating it in your home environment because you haven't yet learned the importance of saying, and again, it just comes back to this: what I feel matters, what I need matters, what I want matters, both for myself and for my partner. And we have to learn to communicate it very clearly, very lovingly. And then we teach our children that you say, I feel hurt, instead of hitting someone. And you say, mom or dad, I need your help with something. And then you can say, I would love to help you with something, but you know what? I need to finish something right now, and I will help you in an hour, or I'll help you tomorrow. And so it's just, we've never learned, this is our conversation going full circle. We came from IQ is king, right? Now the world, the buzzword is EQ, right? Emotional intelligence and emotional awareness. And the irony is that emotional awareness leads to, I think, a higher IQ and a higher, healthier expression of intellect. And so it's this emotional awareness that then leads to clarity of communication. And that's really the solution, so that a parent, as a father or a mother, you can say, I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now. I just need a little bit of help, instead of, you're so fucking selfish, leave me alone. Because we never learned how to communicate effectively. And then what does that do? That creates hurt and anger between everybody that sometimes doesn't go away, and it just gets worse. So it's all about healthy communication. It really, really is. But you got to have time and space to be in tune with yourself, so you can say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, because a lot of times you don't even know you're feeling overwhelmed, and then you just snap and you hurt everybody.
Very true. Very true. It definitely is like, I got it off that treadmill for a little bit to just be able to, and I think ultimately it's like, at some point we just have to make that a priority, that's what we want to start to work on. And then we start to make those changes. Sometimes those happen when they need to happen, and then people get sick or hurt or something, and then they have to take time out, and there's an opportunity. Right now, I feel like there is a big pause for the whole world to have a chance to kind of reflect on some of those things. It's like there was a lot of talk around, getting back to normal. It's like, well, stop to think about which parts of normal did not work for you to begin with, and where would you want it to actually look like?
Absolutely.
One of the really important pieces you talked about was just honestly being able to talk to yourself and honestly recognize what you're feeling, and then have I would say, the courage to be able to verbalize it. Now, if it's a situation that's maybe not so safe, I think that's really important then to have like a journal or something, just like get stuff out, so you're able to express your honesty on something. But
exactly.
I remember did a lot of work with Dr. David Hawkins. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of him, but I think you'd really like his work probably too. But he would talk about courage kind of being that level that we need to be able to hit, where we start to move to more pro-life versus things that are sort of not pro-life. And that level of courage and honesty, I think, all kind of ties together. So, and it doesn't mean you have to blurt it out to everybody, but just within yourself. Because otherwise, I think what happens a lot of times is we then tell ourselves stories around what we're not. So if we're, say, uncomfortable with making certain changes in our life, or whether it's not safe, or we're just not ready to do it, or we're fearful of what other people's judgments or responses are going to be, we tend to then create a story that's not really real as to why we're not doing something, or doing something. And then that story becomes very real and we actually start to believe it. And then that becomes part of our belief system. So part of that whole process, like you said, to start to break the chain is just, we need to have an honest conversation with ourselves and just know where we actually are. Even if we don't want to do anything with it yet, just putting it down on paper or something so that we can be aware of it.
100%. Yeah, I think that's, you know, such valuable advice. And writing is, for me, was such a healing and cathartic process. You know, it gives you time to get clear with your thoughts and feelings before you start to open up. And then obviously, I never knew how to do this, but I really encourage people to ask for help and go see a therapist. You know, go talk to somebody, and you pay them to be a best friend, that they listen to you. They have some skills to help you mirror back, and go talk to somebody that, you know, you don't feel threatened by. It's safe. It's, you know, I really encourage people. There's no shame in that, and you can keep it to yourself if you want, but you got to get it out. You can't keep it in. And you know, you got to start somewhere. The last thing that popped in my head, though, when you brought up the example of a mother, is too, I always say to women, you know, like what example do you want to set for your daughter, for example, or for your son with their expectations of a woman or their partner? And think in those terms, like be an example to your daughter and your son of what, you know, an empowered, authentic, vulnerable, you know, mother partner is. And I think it's a really good way to frame it. You know, if I valued myself fully, how would I be in my family? So that you're teaching your daughter, well, this is what a woman who values herself looks like, you know. And same as a father, you know, this is what a man who is open, vulnerable, emotionally in tune, but still strong, still, you know, functional. You know, this is what it looks like. And I like to think in terms of legacy, setting an example. I find that puts things in perspective for a lot of people. Because sometimes you, right, as a parent, you won't do it for you because you still don't value yourself enough. But you might do it for your children because you are, right, a woman who's living the way you were describing is valuing her children and everybody else more than herself. So sometimes you got to kind of meet them psychologically where they are and say, okay, fine. Well, is this the example you want to set for your daughter, that she should be living like this and feel like this? Is this the example you want to set for your son, that he should be, this is what a man's life looks like, that, you know, his feelings don't matter, his needs don't matter, just be a provider, just be stoic? Because that's not healthy, right? Yeah.
No, and when you said, I mean, kids are dad, and I've got 3 kids, and being a dad, and it's like kids are always a mirror for what's going on with them. I mean, really, it's like they are always a mirror for something that we need to work on ourselves. And, you know, even when we say, you know, that old saying, do what I say, not what I do, and they respond to what you do, I'd even go one more step and say they respond to where you are and who you are. It's like, I might do something, but if say I'm doing something and I'm still feeling resentful for doing it, they're not going to pick up on what I'm doing. They're going to pick up on the resentfulness that I'm experiencing at that point in time. And they know like that, as far as what's going on. So it's and then sometimes it'll even catch it. It'll make me laugh. It's like, yeah, there we go again. So it's and then, you know, I find if I can ever chuckle about it and throw some humor into it, that helps me break the context of the situation faster than anything, because it just lets me kind of all of a sudden flip perspectives if I can find something to kind of chuckle about and not take it quite so seriously, because ultimately it's all a work in progress, and everybody's all in it together. As much as we think some people have got it dialed right in, there'll be an example somewhere at some point with some situation that will jump on you, and even when you think you've got it all figured out. So don't worry, people out there, you're not alone on it.
Every day. Yeah. I always say every day. Yeah. That's a really important point. Every day we're tested, right? And so even if, like, let's say today, you and we are perfect in our health and how we treat ourselves and how we treat everybody. Well, tomorrow, right, something's going to test us, and it can be anything. There'd be a full moon, you know, who knows, you know what I mean? There'd be another lockdown, you know, you stub your toe, you know, it could be anything, and you're tested again.
I think it's so funny when you get certain lessons that keep showing up, and maybe you're only used to seeing that lesson, say, in a certain dynamic, maybe with like a relationship with a partner. but then all of a sudden that lesson shows up in this, it's the same lesson, but now you got a different player. Maybe it's your child or it's a colleague at work. So it's almost like just when you think you've gotten a handle on it in one situation, you get another way to sort of see another aspect or another layer of it that you get to work with. So Blake, I want to be respectful of your time. I've really enjoyed. I know I've given you enough content to go through for about 3 days of our conversation, but I want to be respectful of your time. And just my last question is, given where the state of the world is right now, given the intensity that's going on, the fears, the frustrations, all of these things that are happening, what would be some starting places for people to burn off some of that emotional buildup, or to start the process of working with some of these intensities and these things that create a lot of suffering? Where would be some gentle places for people to begin right now, given where we all are?
I think exactly what you're describing is so important in terms of keeping in mind that we don't know what anybody else is going through. And I think that there's a big need for just kindness and patience, because we're quick to go back to, oh, I want to go get my coffee at Starbucks and I want to get to the grocery store and I want to get out, but I got my mask and, there's so many little things we're dealing with. And so, how can I just come from this mindset of I need to be kind, I need to be patient, because I don't really know what they're suffering with, but people are struggling right now. And I think it's so easy to get, tunnel vision in your own little world. And then you go out and you kind of forget. And I think it's really helpful to just be aware of that. And then the more you're putting that out there, I think the more you're going to get that back, in terms of people being short to you. Like if you're nice and you're kind and you say please and you say thank you, and people are going to be nicer to you because they're having a hard time too. They're like, for example, you go to the grocery store, you go get your coffee, they're in the public, they're seeing people all day because they need to pay their bills, but yet they're exposed, to bacteria and germs and the virus more. And, there's all these little things that we're not aware of. So I think just this, how can I just be as kind as I can be right now is a really good mantra. I think going off of what we were talking about just 10 minutes ago, everybody needs some time for themselves. So I think being at home, in particular in quarantine, like you've described with your family, for your sanity and for everybody's sanity, I think everybody in the family deserves at least a half hour to an hour of alone time. So it's like, I would say, like, go for a walk by yourself, get in your car and listen to the music you like and drive, put down the window, go take a half hour to an hour of yourself just so you have some space. If you want to scream, if you want to cry, you could call a friend, whatever it is you need in that hour. You need some time for yourself, especially families that are at home, that are not used to being at home all the time together. I think that's really important. I think exercise is crucial right now, especially gyms are closed. So I think, again, having a walk, riding a bike, whatever you can do outside, do some yoga, whatever it is that you enjoy, go for a swim. I think, a lot of times, even when we don't exercise because we're busy rushing around, we feel a little bit more movement, we feel less stagnant. And so if we don't get to the gym or we don't get the workout in, we don't feel it as much. But I think when you're at home and you're not running around all day, and so you're not naturally moving your circulation and your energy as much, and then you can't just like pop into a class or pop into the gym as easily, or you don't want to because you don't want to take a Pilates class with a mask and bring home something to your family. We're facing all these dynamics. You got to do something to move your blood and your energy, because that makes you feel better. It releases great, hormones and chemicals in the body. And it also moves your emotions. It moves your spirit. It moves your energy. So your energy doesn't get depressed. And depression is really a term that describes energy being stuck and stagnant in the body. And everything in the body is energy. So blood is energy. Emotions are energy. Thoughts are energy. So you want to keep everything flowing so you don't get stuck. So, and then I think, listening to a podcast like your show, listen to a lot of support. There's like thousands and thousands of podcasts. Just listen all the time. Go read, read books about positive thinking, about self-healing. And, You know, there's so much content to devour on YouTube for free. So, you know, surround yourself with positive content, especially if you're having trouble kind of, you know, breathing right now, or keeping your head above water metaphorically. And again, ask for help if you're really struggling. You know, for me, just hearing about this guy who took his life recently, you know, he was, you know, captain of the football team, you know, tough guy, everybody loved him, and he was going through stuff inside of himself. And so, you know, just to ask for help, talk to somebody, because life can be so worth living, and you don't need big things. It's just little things, and you just got to talk about it. Like I said to a friend, you know, I wish I had known, I wish I could, if I could have had one conversation with him, you know, not that it's my responsibility, but if I could just had one opportunity to shift his thinking about some things. And that's really all you need. So if you're having that dark of a time, one conversation can shift everything. So please reach out for help. I've got, you know, links and resources on my website. I'm sure you have lots of links, you know, on your site. So for anybody who's really having a tough time, there is help out there, and there are good people who care. You know, that's another thing. People think that everybody is selfish and everybody sucks, but there actually are some really good human beings on the planet that are very helpful if you are open.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, great advice. And it's so true. You know, little droplets of kindness and understanding and compassion can shift everything. You know, it's like that little drop of ink in a big bowl of water, and it's like it can just gradually change the whole thing. So never underestimate some genuine support and help, and how much of an impact that can make. Blake, for people that would like to learn more about your work, where can we send them to? I know things are a little different as far as for retreats and stuff right at the moment, but if we can send people, where would we send them to learn more about the work you're doing and how they can get more in touch with you?
So my website is unconditional-selflove.com. And then my book on Amazon is a great resource, which is You Were Not Born to Suffer, or my name, Blake Bauer, Bauer. It's all very, very easy to find. So
awesome. I'm going to put all of the links in the show notes for you too. And everybody can click on that and find your work, and we'll have a link for your book and everything there as well.
great.
Blake, that was great. Thanks so much. I've still got lots of questions I'd like to ask you at some point too. So maybe we'll do a follow-up at some point and peel some other layers off the whole thing.
I would love to, Jason. It was so nice talking to you. So
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.